was the mince one. Okay.
I call the March meeting of the Governance Committee of the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York to order. And we're meeting in New York. Several members and balance of members are in Albany. We distributed the minutes. We distributed the agenda earlier. And first item of business is to review and adopt the minutes of the November 12th meeting. Does everyone have a chance to review them? Do I hear any?
For the day.
Do I hear any comments on the minutes? All right. Anybody comments from Albany on the minutes? Then I need a motion to adopt them. Before I say, I think actually Mr. Romsky's been appointed a member of the committee for this meeting. I had forgotten that. So do I hear a motion to adopt the minutes as distributed?
Can I raise? I don't think I'm.
Are we in a total vacuum?
You want a motion? I'll give you a motion.
Yeah.
Jerry's making.
Jerry made the motion. Al, you seconded it?
Might not be on the committee.
Oh,
Would you clarify for me, Mike, whether I appointed myself to this committee?
we also need to figure out.
You are
why
on
they
the
can't-
committee.
They don't seem to be hearing.
Outstanding.
Can you hear us there?
Second.
Can you hear us there?
Tracy,
Yes,
can you hear
yes.
us?
We can, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Can I get a second for to adopt the minutes?
I just did.
Oh, you did, okay. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Carried. The next, we're going to review, we have a series of annual requirements here that happen every March. It's been my recommendation to Mike Cusack, in order to streamline future meetings, divide this pile of routine approvals up over a 3-month period and get them done so we can move to the overall board meeting in March in an expedited fashion. So that ball has now been bounced off to the council. So that'll be what we do in this next year. So we'll start with the review of the Corporate Governance Committee Charter and Governance Principles, the annual review. And I believe, Lois, you want to make some comments, Mike?
Yes, thank you. And as an overview, we're going to do things a little bit different here to try to be more efficient. But at this meeting, the committee is being asked to conduct its annual review of certain corporate governance items, including DASNY's Governance Committee Charter, the governance principles, the bylaws, and the mission statement and performance measures, which include the metrics to quantify performance goals. In addition, the Governance Committee is also completing this afternoon its annual review of certain DASNY operational policies, procedures, and guidelines, including the Code of Ethical Conduct for board members, the Whistleblower Protection Policy and Procedure, third, the policy regarding payment of compensation and reimbursements to and time and attendance of senior management, and last, the guidelines pertaining to the disposition of certain property owned by DASNY. I'm going to focus today's presentation on the 2 items where staff is making recommendations. So from the agenda, the first item that comes up with recommendations for staff is number 4, the DASNY bylaws. Staff is proposing an amendment to section 3.7 of the bylaws to allow the use of video conferencing equipment in cases involving a request by a member for a reasonable accommodation approved by the chair. Section 3.7 currently allows the use of video conference technology at board meetings in circumstances where a member or members, plural, cannot make it to the location where a quorum of the board is gathered due to inclement weather conditions. After review and discussion, we're recommending this further modification for a reasonable accommodation, using the phrase reasonable accommodation in the normal sense, which would mean typically an illness, disability, or for religious reasons. As with the inclement weather requirements, a quorum of the board would still be gathered at the main meeting location, and all normal open meetings law requirements would apply to the location at which participation by means of video equipment is allowed. So with that being said, that's the recommendation of staff, and if there are any questions or comments, we can answer those at this time.
My only question is the use of the word gather. That doesn't seem to me to imply the requirement that there be a quorum at one location. That, a gathering, to me, is sort of ad hoc. To my mind, it's a matter of use of that one word, I think.
I think that if you go further down in the paragraph, after the proposed revision, it says, and where a quorum is or will be present, then the chair may determine that additional members may participate in the meeting. It's middle of the page.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay.
Yeah. Just so long as there's no implication that the word gathering is, that we are going to meet the standards of the open meeting law by having a quorum in one location.
Absolutely.
That's correct.
That is correct. And the language of the bylaws is more precise than my memorandum. So.
Very good. Any other questions on this, Mike's proposed changes to the bylaws?
So if there are no further questions, we ask for a motion to refer the bylaws to the board with this change.
To refer them to the board, with recommendation that the board approve it. Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Second? Go ahead.
Second.
They're not voting.
Oh, yeah. Okay, second, good. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Carried. All right, next, whistleblower policy.
Yes, the second item that engendered some comment was the whistleblower protection policy and procedure. And essentially, to follow up on the discussions with the governance committee that were held last year, as I included with my memorandum that's in the board book, staff is recommending additional updates to the whistleblower protection policy and procedure. I think if I was to simplify this, I would say that as detailed in the memorandum, the modifications are proposed to the policy section, the definition section, and the procedure section, and include recommended language in the ABO guidance for whistleblower access and assistance programs. I'd like to note carefully that the feature of DASNY's current policy, which extends certain whistleblower protection not only to DASNY's members, officers, and employees, but also to consultants and contractors, is not changed with these revisions. That protection still exists in the proposed revisions. The procedure section really has been revised to more clearly recognize the two different stages of a whistleblower complaint. And if a whistleblower believes that he or she has suffered a personnel action or other retaliation by an employee of DASNY for exercising his or her rights under this policy and procedure, Section 2 is specifically clarified to allow for reporting and investigation of that complaint. I need to note that DASNY does not have the ability to control personnel action or retaliation against consultants or contractors by actors not employed by DASNY, such as the hierarchy within the consultant or contracting firm. Having said that, consultants and contractors would be protected against retaliation by DASNY employees. Again, normal processes and procedures would apply throughout the whistleblower review process, including general counsel disclosure to DASNY's president and the chair, and updates on relevant information to the board or relevant committee in an executive session. So with that, we'll take any comments on the proposed revisions to the policy and procedure.
Anybody have any questions of Michael on this? Comments?
I don't.
All right. And what we need to do is to go ahead and ratify this and recommend it to the board for adoption.
What happens, Mike, if you violate the policy? What's the rights, like, what happens?
Well, depending on your status as an employee within DASNY, you're subject to discipline up to and including termination from employment. So, different rights and procedures apply. If you're in the union, there's a grievance process that you follow for discipline, notice of discipline.
But does like the whistleblower have some, like, private cause of action against DASNY for?
That's a good question. What the policy allows is for us to take corrective action before the whistleblower initiates that type of an action against us. It's preventative. It allows management an opportunity to learn of the dispute and try to resolve it through the normal management process.
Thank you.
Mike,
I think,
one question. Is there other state or federal law that protects a whistleblower that would supersede this policy?
Another good question, because at the top of the policy, and I'm just going to refer to it myself here. Hang on one second. At the top of the policy, you'll see a notation that Public Authorities Law 2857, Civil Service Law 75-B, Labor Law 740, and State Finance Law 191, as well as Executive Law 55, Subdivision 1, in addition to other federal laws, provide employees and other parties with protection against retaliation for whistleblowing. So this is on top of that. It does not replace any of that, and I would consider it to be additive or cumulative. A good example is the New York State False Claims Act, which is in the Executive Law 55-1, which not only applies to DASNY employees but applies to contractors and consultants. So there are whole other bodies of law that offer additional protections. Again, this is intended to be our protection and our mechanism for trying to resolve disputes early.
So it's reasonable to say that if we had a whistleblower situation, we would be looking at our own policy first, but we'd also be looking at these other laws to see whether they are more protective of the whistleblower, and therefore we would be trying to assimilate all of this policy and regulation to arrive at whatever we're going to do.
That is correct.
Okay.
so any other comments before we pass a resolution to recommend this to the board tomorrow?
None here. Motion.
Gary?
Second.
Second. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on.
So with respect to the other governance committee and board annual review requirements that are on today's agenda, I'd like to note that staff has reviewed each of these items, and subject to comments from the governance committee or any other board member present here this afternoon, staff is recommending no further updates currently to the following: the governance committee charter, the governance principles, the mission statement, performance measures, which include the metrics to quantify performance goals, the code of ethical conduct for board members, the policy regarding payment and compensation and reimbursements to and time and attendance of senior management, and last, the guidelines for the disposition of certain property owned by the dormitory authority. It's at this point that I'd like to state that we're happy to go through these individually and answer any concerns that the members may have. But if there are none, I would state that the record would reflect that this annual review process was completed with respect to these items and that the committee members concurred with staff's recommendation. But again, I'm not trying to do it all at once. If you want to go through it one at a time, it's fine.
So we've been through these policies numerous times, at least once a year for the last long as long as I've been. There are no changes to what we have been doing. There seems to have been no pressure in the last year for change in this direction. Nothing that would lead one to conclude that something like this should be changed. So, policy should remain intact.
So the only thing I'll ask for is to fulfill annual compliance review requirements in the public authorities law with respect to the performance measures and metrics, as well as the guidelines pertaining to the disposition of certain property owned by DASNY, that the committee agreed to refer those to the board for approval tomorrow with no recommended changes.
You need any action by us to do that?
Before you do it, Mike, just for my own clarification. So there are two matters here that have to be referred to the board for action. The others are satisfied by our annual review of those matters. And that would have been true even if we had revised, say, the Code of Ethical Conduct for board members, or would it?
If we had made revisions to a policy or a procedure, we would have sent that forward.
Okay, so the rule is
All
that
forward.
any revisions to these policies go before the full board for review and approval.
That's correct. So if we
Okay.
look at, I'll just give you an example, governance principles. Our governance committee charter at section E says that this is an annual review item, and the public authorities law at 2824-7 says that the governance committee's responsibility is to recommend changes to the principles to the full board for review.
Got it.
And since we're not recommending any changes, there's no action that needs to follow. But each one has its own thread that's a little unique depending on where it falls in the statute book and in our own governance documents.
Got it. And thank you.
You're welcome.
So we don't need to take any action today. Or do we need a resolution that we're going to recommend all of this to the board?
We're going to recommend the
ones you just articulated.
the two that I articulated.
We've
One's-
done that already.
I don't think we've finished it.
We
We
didn't
proposed
vote.
it, but
Okay,
We didn't vote.
all right. Okay, we've done two resolutions that we're going to recommend, so now we got to do the balance.
so now we have to do, there are two in the list that I read that have to be forwarded specifically. One is the
Governance.
yeah, the metrics, we'll call it the mission statement and metrics, we'll just call it for shorthanding, and the other is the property guidelines. Those have to go forward to the board.
Do I hear a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Terry?
Aye.
All right. Now, that takes care of that. Now,
That is correct. I'll turn it over to you, we're done with
I want to propose that we go into executive session, discuss financial and credit history of particular corporations, proposed pending and current litigation, the employment history of particular persons or matters related to the appointment, employment, promotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of particular persons. Second, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We're going into executive session. We're, the governance committee is coming out of executive session, and the record shall reflect that the board took no action, the governance committee took no action except to return from the executive session. For that, we need to adjourn the governance committee of the DASNY meeting and convene the governance committee of North General and Atlantic,
That's correct.
and the two governance committees of our subsidiaries. So do I have a
I
motion?
move adjournment.
And, all right, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
All right, now we'll call to order.
Kim's got to start the.
Oh, yeah, Kim, now you, she